Steve, you heard everyone was waiting to see what he would say on camera about Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The reporter there, Margaret, was asking why he was continuing to twist in the wind, and he said that he doesn't know yet. We'll see what happens as to whether or not he'll be fired. What do you make of his comments?
It's interesting because he didn't really advance the story at all. The question was, what are you going to do about Jeff Sessions? You've been saying all these things about him on Twitter, calling him beleaguered, criticizing him left and right on Twitter. You heard the question, as you mentioned, about you're leaving him twisting in the wind. He said, no, I'm just disappointed in the Attorney General. And then he went on to say later that he thinks he needs to be tougher on leaks coming out of the intelligence community. So it really sort of raises another question: is what the heck is going on here with the president? Is he just trying to light a fire under Sessions to get him to work more closely on, work with him on the Russia investigation, even though he said he's disappointed that he recused himself from the Russia investigation? Or is he really setting him up to be fired or trying to get him to quit? It's very unclear what's going on here. The president didn't really shed any light on those questions. He just sort of said, we'll see what happens. And that was the quote of the president, which is a quote that he actually likes to say a lot of times when he doesn't seem to have an answer for the question, which is, we'll see what happens. Well, that's what he said, and I'm sure we'll be sitting here waiting to see what happens.
I want to bring in CBSN Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez, who joins us now. Leslie, the fact that he has said that I would have picked somebody else, what do you make of it? Is there a strategy here that the president's using? What do you make of it?
It feels like another game of The Apprentice. I honestly have to say there were so many people auditioning, if you think about it, throughout the course of the campaign, like most people do, for a very coveted, integral part of this new administration, and a Republican win that many Republicans were salivating for, that this was really an opportunity to turn the tide and change, you know, and do something about some big legislation. For many Republicans, there's the constant frustration that we're undermining ourselves, and this kind of public warfare where now these secretaries have to defend themselves, you know, or respond to these things is becoming so chaotic that it is making it very difficult for them to focus on their daily business.
Steve, I want to ask you the fact that if he were to fire the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, do you think that adds more fuel to the fire for the Mueller investigation?
Absolutely. But I do want to talk about and bounce off something Leslie just said, which is the political issue that Trump's going to have to deal with. I don't think he really understands the level of what's building up here within the Republican Party and among conservatives about Jeff Sessions. These are people who really like Jeff Sessions. This is a guy who served in Washington in Congress and as a senator for decades. He's very well respected among Republicans and conservatives. You're seeing people come to his defense in the last couple of days in light of the president's tweets. And I think really, I'm not sure the president understands that if he does fire or force Sessions out, what can of worms he's opening up just within the Republican Party and among conservatives. You're hearing Rush Limbaugh yesterday saying, what are you doing, President Trump, with all this Sessions stuff? You're seeing Breitbart write an article today asking the same question. We support Jeff Sessions. What are you doing, Mr. President? So I'm not sure what's going on in the president's head at this point, but I can tell you right now that if something happens to Jeff Sessions in the coming days and weeks, there's going to be a big political fallout within his own party. You can pretty much guarantee that.
Leslie, Steve talks about a political fallout. We just had 51 to 50 voting in favor to move forward on the debate on Obamacare. What do you make of the fact? What will this president be facing as they move forward on the debate on health care?
Well, it was by the slimmest of margins, and make no mistake, this was the vote, you know, the big key and important vote, which is why I think we saw what will be by far one of the most heralded speeches in Senator John McCain, basically talking about the need to return to regular order, to bring some civility back to all of this process, especially on something where the details matter. So this is going to continue to build. Now a lot needs to be done. They're going to do a lot with amendments, a lot of political maneuvering. But the fight is not over in terms of the political fight. This is something that these members still have to explain, have to understand, have to vote for again, and fundamentally take it back to their districts. And many just don't know where they stand. So it takes a tremendous amount of political leadership to navigate the Congress through this. And that's what the Republicans certainly want right now. They don't want to be talking about Sessions. They don't want to be talking about Russia. They want to be talking about health care.
I want to bring in Zeke Miller, CBSN contributor and White House reporter for Time Magazine. Zeke, you were there at the event at the White House today with Prime Minister Hariri and President Donald Trump. We heard Donald Trump say that he wants the Attorney General to be tougher on leaks from intel agencies. They're intel agencies, and we can't have that, is what he said. What do you make of the press conference today?
Certainly, the president not offering any real clarity about the status of his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. He wouldn't admit that, say that he had conflicts with him, and that time will tell whether or not he's given him that job. He did sort of lay out that marker about he was looking for Sessions to make some sort of public sort of display of going after leakers. But the Attorney General, at the end of the day, personally can't direct that. If can't sort of launch investigations or arrest supposed leakers overnight or willy-nilly without evidence. So the president is looking for the sort of thing that the Attorney General just might not ever be able to deliver, and that could be the sort of test that sort of sets up his potential exit from that job.
Zeke, I want to play a soundbite for you just before this press conference with Saad Hariri took place. It was of John McCain, who entered the Senate floor to a thunderous standing ovation. And he was talking about the fact, yes, he did vote yes to continue the debate, but he also talked about what he's looking forward for in the future on this debate. Let's play that soundbite.
We are an important check on the powers of the executive. Our consent is necessary for the president to appoint jurists and powerful government officials, and in many respects, to conduct foreign policy. Whether or not we are of the same party, we are not the president's subordinates. We are his equal. As his responsibilities are onerous, many and powerful, so are ours. We play a vital role in shaping and directing the judiciary, the military, and the cabinet in planning and supporting foreign and domestic policies. Our success in meeting all these awesome constitutional obligations depends upon cooperation among ourselves. The success of the Senate is important to the continued success of America.
Zeke, you heard those comments by Senator John McCain. What is the White House? What are you hearing from them about pushing this legislation forward? What do they want? What's likely to happen?
So they are certainly, very happy with the motion to proceed today. The president delayed the start of his 2-2 with Prime Minister Hariri, in part to show deference to John McCain, in sort of symbolic thanks for coming back. But that message is the sort of thing that the president certainly would not be very happy to hear. It indicates that John McCain would say that he's not for the current draft of this health care bill, calling for a return essentially to regular order, working across party lines. That's all the sort of things that are off the table right now for Republicans trying to jam this health care bill through the Senate in the next few days. So it was sort of an interesting sort of study in contrast. Both the White House is very happy that John McCain is back, but that's sort of message that they're not going to particularly enjoy.
And to Steve Chaggaris, healthcare, having more affordable healthcare was a big promise of this president. Also, an infrastructure bill. He's going to head to Ohio today, where he made those promises, Steve, to many of those voters there, many of whom, some of them were Democrats and independents who turned and actually voted for him. Previously had voted for President Obama. What do you think they'll be looking for? What are you watching for when the president goes to Ohio today?
Well, I think we're going to expect what he normally does at these types of events, which is sort of rally the crowd, get up there and just sort of shoot from the hip. Like we saw yesterday at his speech to the Boy Scouts, which wasn't really supposed to be much of a political rally type speech. It turns out it was. He hits on everything, whether it's health care, immigration, pretty much the old campaign speech. So I anticipate that's what we're going to hear, because that's what gets the crowd riled up. The people that show up to these events aren't necessarily people who have questions about Donald Trump and his policies. These are supporters of Donald Trump that show up to these events. So I assume that the people who are going to be in the crowd are going to be the ones that want to hear the Donald Trump red meat that we heard for a year and a half on the campaign trail. And I expect he's going to give them what they want to hear, which is traditionally what he does at these types of events.
To Leslie Sanchez. Leslie, you've watched the Republican Party and worked closely with them. What do you make of the fact that these promises from the campaign trail, many of them from health care to infrastructure to taxes, well, it's only 6 months in, they haven't really moved forward. What are you hearing from Republicans?
there's two sides to that. Now, some Republicans feel that the party is twisting in the wind, that there's no direction, poor leadership, a tremendous amount of dysfunction that is taking away from really getting into the weeds on some of these key issues, not having a lot of secrecy, and kind of the PR problems that are resulting from swiftly moving legislation through. There's another band of Republicans who are feeling confident and giving the president a pass, so to speak, on being able to get this done, and giving him not necessarily high marks, but generally feeling good that this is all kind of a neophyte problem. It's sophomoric mistakes that these will smooth out, and the president is really changing America for the better. So it's yet to be determined. I think, Reena, the question becomes, where do we go in the fall? Because the spring is when they start sweating. The spring is when we're really going to see, is there anything to run on looking at midterms?
Mm-hmm. And to Zeke Miller, Mitch McConnell spoke about bipartisanship earlier, and he says that it's time that the Democrats and Republicans get on the same page when it comes to health care. How likely is that at this point?
It's very unlikely, as Leslie mentioned, now's the time when Republicans are trying to get their guts in order for the 2018 election. Democrats are doing the same thing. We saw them roll out their messaging plan the coming year and a half yesterday, and that has nothing to do with working together with Republicans on just about anything. Maybe keeping the government open, the debt limit, but beyond that, it's largely about being sort of in the opposition, sort of trying to obstruct the Trump agenda because they believe it's bad for their constituents, bad for the country. It's in their perspective. So it's very unlikely to see them reaching across the aisle on health care legislation. It's sort of the Republican pipe dream right now. One of the options is for the health care bill is to sort of create a sort of sunset for the provision to create a window of opportunity for the two sides to work together. But far more likely, what you'd end up seeing are Democrats just trying to back Republicans to the corner and try to find the districts and states where they can maybe flip some seats, at least narrow the Republican majority, if not flip one or two of the chambers. Working together would not get them there. If they want to win in 2018, they need to be opposed to whatever health care bill Republicans either pass or attempt to pass, not be working with them.
Steve, what will you be looking for in the coming hours on the health care debate?
I think what everybody's going to be looking for is what direction are the Republicans going to go with this. They have a few options, and we don't really know, and none of them, frankly, have overwhelming support within the Republican conference. So what does this wind up looking like at the end of the day, and will they have 50 votes to get this thing through the Senate? And then, of course, what does it look like at the end of the day, and how will the Senate and House versions be reconciled in order to get something that will pass the entire Congress and to the president's desk? I think back, the president just said today, I've been saying how hard it is to get health care through. Well, he hasn't always been saying that. He said how easy it was during the campaign. In fact, he promised it on day one of his presidency. And we're sitting here at the end of July watching the Senate really wrestle with this. And so the next few days are really going to be very interesting to watch. The Senate's going to come up with something. Perhaps it'll pass, perhaps it doesn't. But if it does pass, that's not what we're going to see ultimately the Senate sign, because the House is going to have their say as well. And so what the Senate is dealing with this week is not going to look like what ultimately the health care changes will be, if any at all.
Steve Chaggaris, I want to thank you for joining us, Steve. I know you've got to run. I want to head now to Leslie Sanchez. Leslie, we heard John McCain. He gave a speech shortly after casting that yes vote for the motion to proceed to take up the debate on health care. But it's interesting, if you had played that speech and told someone you don't know how he voted, it might be hard to tell that he had actually voted yes. He said, I would not vote for this bill as it is today. What do you make of the fact that Republicans are going to have to, they have a lot of requests on what their constituents want to piece together health care, and it's not easy. Where do you see this going?
It was so needed. The great thing about that speech is the senator said what needed to be said, and that was very much that neither side could yield to radical elements. That they had to stand strong and he talked, we go back to, regular order of the Senate, something that's worked for 200 years, to really, there's a reason it takes lower process, is to try to get it right. Nothing's going to be 100%, but it's going to be better than these kind of dead of night, fully secret, half-baked bills that, again, devil in the details, we find out later have more dramatic effects and don't do what they intended. That was basically the big criticism for Obamacare. And you're asking Americans to take a big leap of faith that we're going to get it right by doing it quickly. And that's a big ask. I think Senator McCain's exactly right, and that's what Republicans are thinking about. We could certainly pass something, but is it the right thing? And they have to work to make that right.
To Zeke, I know you've got to head out. Zeke, I want to ask you, as the president's agenda moves forward here, health care, obviously, as we're talking about, a big thing, but Attorney General Jeff Sessions, where do you see that going, and what are they saying in the White House? How concerned are they?
From the White House perspective, there are two schools of thought here. Obviously, the president is very dissatisfied with his attorney general, is contemplating some sort of replacement for him. There are those who are encouraging the president to sort of not take that route, in part because of the implication with regarding the special counsel, the Russia investigation, but also what that would say sort of more broadly about shakeups within the administration. But the president seems inclined to go that direction. But every indication from Attorney General Sessions is that he's willing to suffer all of the indignities that we now know are inherent to serving in this administration. He's willing to put up with being called beleaguered and being called very weak by the president if it means doing his job. That is, as long as the president doesn't fire him.
All right, Zeke Miller, White House reporter for Time Magazine and CBSN contributor, and Leslie Sanchez, a CBSN contributor as well. Thank you both for joining us.